Next up, we have Skuntank. First introduced to trainers in the Generation 4 games Diamond and Pearl, it was the signature Pokemon of Team Galactic's Commander Jupiter. Those who played Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Darkness and Sky will remember Skuntank well too. It was the notorious leader of the villainous Team Skull, no not that one, and would use its stench to knock opponents out. Today we're going to explore if Skuntank was able to successfully pull similar tricks in the competitive scene, or if opposing trainers and Pokemon were able to effectively plug their noses. And so, we ask, how good was Skuntank actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. Skuntank was blessed with several valuable qualities. Its typing and stat spread were not exactly that of an OU Pokemon, but it was certainly of great interest in the lower tiers. Theoretically, it was able to pursuit ghost types that would thwart Boom while exploding itself. Tyranitar could never. It was a fun concept, but nothing seriously came of it. In UU, however, Skuntank certainly had a niche. Its main use was that of a pursuiter. It could effectively remove common Pokemon like Mismagius, Rotom, Mesprit, and Uxie, which would greatly facilitate teammates that would otherwise struggle to deal with them, such as fighting types like Primeape. Skuntank also had the valuable niche of being a grounded poison type, preventing its team from being troubled by toxic spikes. The main problem was that there was a lot of competition for this role of dark type pursuiter from other Pokemon who offered lots of other upsides, meaning they didn't even have to run pursuit to be effective. Spiritomb was an excellent rapid spin blocker, had solid bulk, and boasted similarly effective typing against the likes of Alakazam, while further being able to mess up the opposition with tactics like Trick and Will-O-Wisp. Houndoom was frail, but was quite fast for UU, packed an incredible immunity to Mismagius and Rotom's Will-O-Wisp, and was a fierce offensive threat in its own right. There was even another poison dark type in the tier, Drapion, who was Skuntank's most direct competition and the primary reason for Skuntank's low usage. Drapion itself was not the most common Pokemon, as it was also generally less common as a dark type than Spiritomb and Doom. But if one wanted their pursuiter to also absorb toxic spikes, it was generally preferred. It had Houndoom tier speed, and its Swords Dance set was one of the most dangerous Pokemon for stall teams to face. Some players even liked Absol for a pursuiter, though it was also a fierce Swords Dancer. In short, Skuntank had lots of competition, but interestingly, this was not one of those cases where it wasn't worth using because of this. In fact, it was completely the opposite. Skuntank was far from outclassed. It was just perceived as such, and quite erroneously because of surface level similarities, such as sharing Drapion's typing. This was a shame because Skuntank occupied a thoroughly unique place in the tier, despite its surface level similarities. Having Explosion can't be emphasized enough. If this was something Skuntank could boast over Tyranitar, then it sure as heck could do the same for the UU dark types. Additionally, even if Skuntank didn't get to Boom, it still had immense utility upon fainting, thanks to its excellent ability Aftermath, which took a nasty 25% chunk out of the Pokemon that KO'd it if it did so with a contact move. And there were plenty of those to go around in UU. If you sacrifice Skuntank to a recoil move like Arcanine's Flare Blitz or Swellow's Brave Bird, you basically took them out of commission. That was absolutely incredible. Additionally, Skuntank had Sucker Punch, which meant it didn't necessarily need to run Shuka Berry to avoid being ruined by Dugtrio, unlike its main competitor Drapion, thereby allowing Skuntank to more easily reap the benefits of Black Glasses' extra power, Black Sludge's extra recovery, or Lumberry's anti-Will-O-Wisp properties. Though the player base at large mostly overlooked Skuntank, experienced UU players recognized that it was far from a discount Drapion and put Skuntank's unique talents to use. And as a result, Skuntank was one of Generation 4 UU's most underrated talents. Of course, since it wasn't UU proper, Skuntank found itself in NU, and there it really came into its own. All the dark types it had competed with in UU had stayed in UU, but in NU, Skuntank didn't have any competition. It was the competition. It was the tier's premier pursuit user, and this niche was highly in demand given the ubiquity and importance of the tier's common walls, Slowking and Hypno. Pokemon Skuntank absolutely dominated, and thus excelled in removing for the benefit of already dangerous offensive teammates like Charizard, Medicham, and Floatzel. Skuntank didn't just destroy walls either. It was arguably the best roadblock to otherwise terrifying offensive threats in Gardevoir and Haunter, while also stuffing the likes of Shiftry and Cacturne. Of course, Skuntank wasn't just a pursuiter either. It was an excellent offensive threat in its own right. It didn't even just go boom. It could mess with defensive cores through finesse, preventing the likes of entry hazards, status, and recovery with taunt, allowing for a prolonged dismantling even when something like Regirock or Cradilly was was standing in the way of its boom. And through this extended assault, eventually that boom would go off and it would be destructive. Skuntank was one of the tier's best Pokemon, period. Many players came to consider it as number 2, right behind King Charizard. It made sense though. It could run so many different sets and run them all incredibly well. It could run an all-out offensive trapping threat that made it dangerous in addition to its pursuing duties. It could run a bulkier set that lent itself better to defensive utility use and longevity. It could even run a Choice Scarf set whose fast explosion would turn the tables on offensive threats that thought they'd outrun and destroy it, like Charizard and Tauros. Skuntank was so good because it fit on pretty much every single type of team and made it better. Offense, balance, defense, they could all make use of Skunk, as even stall teams liked its pursuing capabilities against ghosts like Haunter and Dusclops, so they could more easily pull off Rapid Spin. Even weather teams loved Skuntank. Sunny Day sweepers were terrified of Scarf Gardevoir tracing their chlorophyll and reverse sweeping them, but Skuntank would remove Gardevoir with Aplomb, then set Sunny Day for its teammates, then Boom to ensure chip, thus making it easier for them to clean up, and safely getting the sweepers back on the field as fast as possible for maximum sun terms without risking damage to themselves. And we haven't even mentioned Aftermath yet. For a Pokemon with such a great ability, to have it as almost an afterthought was testament to how good Skuntank was. For most Pokemon, it'd be one of their defining features. Of course, Skuntank did make great use of it, as there's nothing like finishing off a chipped Tauros or Medicham with a Death Fodder Pokemon. Skuntank had an incredible amount of variety for what was ostensibly variations on the same role of pursuing. It always excelled in and defined the NU tier. So overall, Skuntank had a great debut generation. Generation 5's power creep was immense and ensured Skuntank wouldn't be able to find a niche in UU this time around, or for that matter, the brand new tier below UU, RU. Skuntank returned to NU, at first apprehensive about its potential vibe because Explosion had been significantly nerfed, but there it was absolutely elite once more. It had plenty of top tier victims to pursue. Skuntank absolutely dominated metagame staples like Gardevoir, Masharna, Duocean, Misdreavus, and Haunter, and though it usually preferred Black Sludge or Lumberry as its item, it could also effectively take advantage of a new Generation 5 addition to expand its reach even more, Air Balloon. This had plenty of obvious benefits. Hovering over the ubiquitous spikes ensured that it would be in prime shape to take on its pursuit targets regardless of how many layers were on the field, and it allowed Skuntank to avoid potential incoming hidden power grounds from the likes of Exeggutor or Haunter as well. However, Air Balloon also allowed Skuntank to handle a Pokemon it'd never dream of combating otherwise. The Stab Earthquake spamming Go Lurk. Turning a ground weakness into an immunity and thereby a point of entry makes Skuntank even better than it already was. Just as before, its Ghost and Psychic removing support was greatly appreciated by fighting types, and this was huge considering how devastating all three of Sock, Girder, and Primeape already were. Plus, it wasn't just offensive support Skuntank was providing. Gardevoir and Haunter were terrifying, difficult to handle threats, and Skuntank's ability to handle them defensively was key. Of course, Aftermath was valuable as always, as an additional tool to help assuage the oft-overwhelming assault of the metagame's many physical attackers, from Sawsbuck to Swellow to Sock. Skuntank had some variety to it as well. Some players threw Life Orb and Hidden Power Grass on it, which absolutely ruined the Caracasa and Golem that thought they were safe, while others experimented with Memento as a method of weakening the opponent so sweepers such as their own Shell Smash Caracasa could safely set up. And so Skuntank was once again absolutely excellent at performing its role, and it did so with a great deal of variety that made it even better. It was a terrific, important piece of Gen 5 NU, marking its second successful generation. Skuntank returned to NU in Generation 6 and forever carved its name as one of the tier's most historically defining Pokemon with another elite performance. It was once again the tier's premier pursuiter, effectively trapping a huge number of top tier Pokemon. To be so effective against the meta-defining Mesprit and Xatu already would have merited a solid niche, but then you add how great Skuntank was at doing the same against Rotom, Haunter, Mismagius, and Exeggutor, and you had a Pokemon who ensured game-to-game consistency. That was, of course, far from the only thing Skuntank did. Though it more notably used its dark typing in its pursuing duties, it was also invaluable at using its poison typing to effectively check other annoying Pokemon, most notably Shiftry, Lilligant, and Mega Audino. As such, Skuntank brought a ton of utility to its team, and that was just with its pursuit set. Wait, what? Isn't that every Skuntank set? Not that there's anything wrong with the variety of pursuit variants Skuntank had, but isn't pursuit the entire reason to use Skuntank to begin with? Not anymore. With the defog buff of Generation 6, Skuntank Skuntank now had a whole new dimension of utility which it could bring to a team, and Pursuit would be nowhere to be seen on such a moveset. It made sense. Rather than do a bad job of trying to Pursuit and Defog, it was best to just focus on one. Skuntank's Pursuit sets didn't try to incorporate Defog either. Skuntank's Defog set attacked from the special side, providing its advantageous matchups against the tier's hazard setters. This was huge in making it an actual effective hazard remover. It would hidden power Grass, Rhydon, and Caracasa into oblivion, burn Steelix, Ferroseed, and Mawile to a crisp with Fire Blast, and plow through Garbodor with a strong stab Dark Pulse. What made Skuntank even better was that the special set often had the element of surprise, as Pursuit was still Skuntank's default. As a result of this and the huge super effective damage it threatened to dish out, Skuntank often went beyond just being a hazard remover and good defensive check, instead of also becoming a terrific lure that baited in and crushed several integral pieces of the metagame that teams relied on as key parts of their defensive backbone. This diversity in sets made Skuntank even easier to slap on nearly every team. It provided so much, was an incredibly consistent performer thanks to its great matchups against several of the tier's best Pokemon, and if running its special Defog set even came with the potentially huge upsides of grabbing a free KO. Oh, and as always, Aftermath had a ton of useful applications. It wasn't exactly something one considered in team building, but in battle, the flexibility offered by the potential to rip 25% off a threatening physical attacker was absolutely excellent. Skuntank also made terrific use of Gen 6's mechanics changes. Its Dark Stabs were no longer resisted by steals, and the addition of Fairy types didn't exactly dissuade it since it hit them super effectively with Poison Stab. As such, Skuntank racked up another outstanding generation of NU. It was the end of an era, as Generation 7's power creep knocked Skuntank out of NU for the first time. But that was just fine, as Skuntank didn't just settle into PU, it became an elite defining part of the tier. It was once again the premier Pursuit user in its metagame, and once again there were plenty of top tier Pokemon it wielded this Pursuit against with aplomb. Haunter, Bronzor, Musharna, weakened Jellicent, and even Cryogonal, who wasn't weak to Pursuit, but had its low physical defense stat preyed on. As always, Skunk was immensely reliable and easy to slap on teams for this utility, and as always, it was able to showcase significant versatility even within the relatively limited confines of its role, starting with its item. Rocky Helmet paired beautifully with Aftermath, letting Skuntank act as an even more effective death fodder, and of course Helmet was useful even when Skuntank wasn't getting KO'd. For example, it was a nice way to punish weak moves like Fake Out and U-Turn. Alternatively, Skuntank could run Black Sludge, whose longevity enhanced its trapping capabilities greatly, or it could do so through Black Glasses or even Lumberry for Jellicent's irritating Will-O-Wisp. Yeah, there was the matter of its last move. Usually it defaulted to Defog, not because it had great matchups against hazard setters, because it didn't, not with a physical moveset, and as such was rarely the choice of Defogger on teams that needed hazards removed consistently, but because it was generally a good option to have, and more effective than whatever else it might fill the slot up with. Usually. It did have solid options. Usually if a teammate could handle hazard clearing duties, then Skuntank could effectively slot in Taunt, which stopped hazards from going up in the first place. Alternatively, it could run Crunch, which made it far better at trapping Jellicent and Cryogonal. Of course, once again, Skuntank could run an effective special attacking Defog set. This was the one you ran if you wanted to more reliably keep hazards off, as the focus on the special side of the spectrum allowed Skuntank to threaten hazard setters more efficiently. It loved the power upgrade of Z moves. Its Dark Pulse turned Black Hole Eclipse, helping to make up for its lower special attack, letting it blast through the likes of would-be answers and hazard setters in Mudsdale, Regirock, Torterra, and Quillfish. It was particularly good in conjunction with Acid Spray's harsh dropping of the opponent's special defense, especially since Skuntank's switch-ins tended to be slower than it. This wouldn't work against Regirock thanks to Clear Body, but if Rock was the switch-in, Skuntank would just spam Dark Pulse anyway. Acid Spray was also effective in conjunction with Taunt to completely ruin any walling attempts by Audino. Skuntank had some variety to this set too. Acid Spray could be switched out for Sludge Bomb, whose irritatingly high 30% poison chance would put checks like Regirock and Girder on a timer, as well as hitting Girder harder in general. Taunt was great to stop Stealth Rock against Carbink and Healthy Regirock, who wouldn't yet be blown away by Black Hole Eclipse, but Skuntank could also effectively slot in Fire Blast to utterly crush Ferroseed and Alolan Sandslash, as well as hit Torterra hard without needing to use up its Z move. Speaking of, Skuntank didn't need Darkinium Z either. It could use Black Sludge just fine. Skuntank went beyond these two sets too. It brought back the DPP throwbacks with Choice Scarf, which increased its pursuit capabilities by now letting it trap and destroy faster Dark Weak Pokemon like Oricorio Sensu and Alolan Raichu. It had some diversity to to the set too. Its last slot was usually defog, since it was a great emergency move thanks to Skuntank's high speed, but it could also make great use of punishment to destroy boosted sweepers like Amistar, Turtonator, and Oricorio Pom-Pom, and it could even slot in Memento as a last-ditch measure to help its own teammates boost safely. Finally, for the first time ever, Skuntank ran Choice Band. This was effectively an extension of the standard Pursuit set, since one of its main role was to more efficiently get rid of opposing Dark Weak Pokemon, namely Jellicent, but it also had the major distinction of being a bona fide wall breaker, with its powerful crunch ripping through a significant portion of the metagame. This was particularly valuable on such a fast Pokemon. It increased the number of advantageous matchups Skuntank had against offensive Pokemon, giving it even more utility. So all in all, Skuntank's first foray out of NU saw it repeating much of the success it had had in the tier prior, and it was a tremendous, important, valuable piece of the Gen 7 PU metagame. Skuntank wasn't introduced in Generation 8 until the Crown Tundra, but it suffered the most brutal nerf imaginable. Pursuit had been removed from the game entirely. As such, there really wasn't any reason to use Skunk at all, even all the way down in PU. Not even Defog was worth anything, as Skuntank was completely dominated by the ever-present Gigalith. The removal of Z-moves also ensured it was going to be more or less hapless against Regirock, Aggron, Sandaconda, and Sandslash too. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem, but since it could no longer Pursuit, Skuntank was just kind of useless. Nasty Plus sets could be decently threatening unless you faced Gigalith, which meant you were playing with a dead slot. And if you played PU, you were going to be facing Gigalith a lot. And since there was no reason to use Skuntank, no one did, and it dropped to untiered in a sudden sharp drop from its former glory. The bitter irony is that if Pursuit had been kept in the game, Skuntank likely would have been excellent again, with all the Mesprit to happily devour. But the whims of Game Freak are beyond us, and yet Skuntank suffered for it. We hope they're happy. And that's it. So how good was Skuntank actually? Well, for nearly its whole competitive career, it has been absolutely excellent in the lower tiers. Pursuit was its game, and it played its game incredibly well. It had a solid underrated niche in DPP UU, but for its first 3 generations of existence, it was defined by being the pursuiter in NU. Much of these metagames revolved around its presence as such. Then when Gen 7 came around with its power creep, Skuntank dropped to PU and did the exact same thing there. It was an elite lower tier Pokemon, until Generation 8 came, removed Pursuit, and unceremoniously threw Skuntank under the bus. Nevertheless, we can focus on Skuntank's generations of achievement instead, as they were resounding successes. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Skuntank? What would you give it in Gen 8 that's not Pursuit so that it could do something else? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.